What's it up on the mountain? It was 72 degrees. You know, the difference in 90-some degrees, it was like 94, 95, and it was 72 up on the mountain. Makes a difference with that elevation. Well, how are y'all doing? Good? All right. Well, tonight what I'd like to do is, I'm talking about COVID. And is there something that we've learned from COVID? Is there an update on COVID? And I'd like to look at it as a sharing amongst each other, because I believe we can learn from each other. And I definitely have learned over the last year regarding COVID. And can someone read for me Daniel 12:1? Daniel 12:1. Who's got that? Okay, is there a microphone? It's always so peaceful coming up here. Y'all are blessed. Y'all are blessed. There we go.
Oh, me? Huh? I didn't know I was doing this, but okay. Daniel 12:1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book.
Do you think it's going to be a terrible time? Do you think so? Absolutely. How do you prepare for a tough time? Practice, yes. Trials. We just did a class, and we sent 5 of my firefighters through basic fire and fire school. And one of the guys, he got to the academy, and he got literally just inside the door of live burn, and he said, "I can't do it. I can't do it." He spent all those months training and learning, taking tests, but he hadn't been in the fire yet. But now we were going to put him in the fire. Now he had been to fires where he had fought fire outside, but you're not allowed to go inside the fire until you get your certification and you have live burn. A lot different when I started. You join this afternoon, tonight you'd be inside a house fire, fighting a fire. And that's good that we changed. And here's a fella, he wants to be a fireman. They open the door to go inside live burn, and there wasn't even a fire in there yet. And he goes, "I can't do it." Well, that's good. Because I don't need him going in to help somebody if he can't do it. Do you know what I'm saying? So God gives us tests. In school, you gave kids tests. I mean, you don't give them trig in kindergarten. No. You start with your numbers, and then your additions, and your subtractions. And then what? Multiplication and division. And then you go on to algebra and geometry and continue on. If you gave a child trig in kindergarten, if you gave me trig right now, they'd fail. Would you agree? And God loves us so much that He gives us tests to build us up. And what you just read, I shared this last year. I was just so blown away last year in March when I went to the Genocide Museum in Rwanda. Over 1 million people died in 100 days. And what they did to those people, we're talking brother-in-laws to brother-in-laws. We're talking neighbors to neighbors. We're talking Seventh-day Adventist to Seventh-day Adventist. Because you're a Hutu and the other one was a Tutsi. They killed them. See, if they didn't kill them, they'd be killed. If they had not killed the Tutsi, they would be killed themselves. If another Hutu saw you saving your brother-in-law because he was a Tutsi, that other Hutu would kill you because you're supposed to kill all Tutsis. And the way they killed them was horrific. I can't discuss it here. We have children. But what they did was it was totally satanic. And if that had happened to my family, I met the conference president. His wife was murdered, and all 8 of his children were murdered. And the way they were murdered, I won't even discuss in here. There was a lady in my class that all of her children were killed, and her mother was killed. I mean, I met people in Rwanda that had no living kinfolk. None. No siblings, no parents, no aunts and uncles, no cousins, no living kinfolk, because they had all been murdered. What an island to live on. And it's going to be worse than that. And so how does God prepare us? God prepares us for different trials. Has COVID been a trial? It has been a trial. I lost my dad to COVID. Now, Dad had cardiac issues. Very significant cardiac issues. He had gone into a rehab center for some rehab for his heart. He had been tested every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. On Friday, before they called me on Sunday morning, he had a negative COVID test. He was in a room by himself. No one was allowed to visit him, only staff who had masks and gloves. And it was from them that he got COVID. On Sunday morning, they called me at 3:30 in the morning. And they said, Mr. Cross, your father's O2 sat is 48. What do you want us to do? I said, how many liters you flowing? They said 5. I said, he normally runs 6. Bring it up to 6 or higher. And they said, we don't have that ability here in the rehab center. I said, transport him. I get dressed. I drive to the hospital, which is in Nashville, actually in Hendersonville, which is 4 hours away. I get there. There's no cars in the parking lot. I walk into the emergency room, and they looked at me like I was from Mars. What are you doing here? My father was just brought in from the rehab center. Is there a waiting room I can wait in? You can't even be on the property. You can't even be in the parking lot. You have to leave. I turn around and drive home 4 hours. And 7 days later, Dad died without even seeing any of us or talking to any of us. It was terrible. Terrible. Trials God allows to come on to us to prepare us for what is to come. Was it devastating? No. Why? We have a blessed hope. Do you agree? Do we have that blessed hope? Do we have the blessed hope that we can see our families? Yes, we do. It was tough, no question. But we have that blessed hope. And I encourage y'all to read The Great Controversy again. As you read about the Waldensians, do you remember the stories about the Waldensians? Do you remember the ladies sitting beside their husbands when they're being burned at the stake and they're singing? Could you do that? Read those stories, that trust in God, where the dragoons would march them off the cliffs. They didn't try to run away. No, they didn't try to get caught. But they didn't struggle just like Christ didn't struggle in Gethsemane. And so God allows us to have trials, and we're going to have a whole lot more, preparing us for Daniel 12:1. Now, I believe Daniel 12:1 is very short and very soon. I really do. Do you see where I put my... Let's see. I was looking where I put my glass of water. Is it back there? Oh, good. All right. Y'all, I've learned something. I might start squealing. I learned something. Yep, I'm going to start squealing. I learned something last fall. I'm taking more courses in school, and I'm continuing on another degree I'm getting, and it was really interesting. We had to take a course in. It was a lot of lab stuff, and so we had to buy a bunch of lab equipment, and you monitored all kinds of issues going on in the body. And one of the items that we monitored was hydration. And so we had, who's best to test on? Us. We're the best to test on. And then family members. So I started testing my hydration, and it was fair, but not good. And then the instructor encouraged us, body weight divided by 2. If you're over 128 pounds, body weight divided by 2. And if you do more than that, that's sit on the couch. If you do more, like the state of Tennessee tells me I have to drink a gallon of water a day because I might go into a house fire. Or if I fight a wildland fire like I did with the Park Service, the Forest Service back several months ago, they require us to drink a gallon of water every hour and a half. It used to be every 2 hours, now it's every hour and a half. And so depending on your activity, you need to drink even more water than body weight divided by 2. So I went to body weight divided by 2 and increased a little bit more. And I still wasn't at hydration. So then now they said, okay, now what we want you to do is we want you to sip on water, 3 to 4 sips of water every 30 minutes, except 15 minutes before you eat, while you eat, to an hour after you eat. An hour after you eat. I'm sorry, y'all. So 15 minutes before you eat, while you eat, to an hour after you eat. No water, no fluids, because we'll talk about that tomorrow afternoon, what happens. But the rest of the day, just take you a sip of 3 to 4 mouthfuls of water every 30 minutes. See, there's something called free flow. And how many of y'all are in healthcare? Remember free flow in physiology? When we drink more than 3 to 5 ounces at any given time, depending on the person, it goes into free flow. It's like having a sponge and pouring water on it, and the sponge is going to absorb only X amount of water. Excess will go all over the table. Well, our bodies do that. It's called free flow. And it just goes right on out to the kidneys and on out to urinate out. But we don't have saturation. So when you sip just a mouthful of water 3 to 4 times every 30 minutes, you actually are able to maximize hydration. And boom, as I tested my hydration, I went to adequate hydration. Isn't that pretty cool? It's kind of like, how many of y'all grow a garden? Okay, it's kind of like, let's say you got some tomatoes and you pour a 5-gallon bucket on the tomatoes. Water's going to go all over the place, right, girls? But if you take and put a little bit of water or use a soaker hose, you're going to have good saturation. And that's what happens when we sip on water. It's pretty cool. Okay, so tonight we're looking at what have we learned from COVID. Is COVID real? Is COVID real? You're in the hospital. Yes, it is real. Is COVID deadly? Yes, it is. Were the COVID numbers accurate? No. Unfortunately, they were not. COVID is totally real, but the numbers are not accurate. And I can tell in my own community of what was happening in the hospitals in my own community, and the staff telling me that people come in with motor vehicle accidents, gunshot wounds, and they were classified as death by COVID. Now, they may have had COVID. They did not die of COVID. They died with COVID. It wasn't the primary diagnosis, and it was being identified as the primary diagnosis. And I believe that was politically done. It was interesting. About a month ago, a lady from the hospital came over, and she's a respiratory therapist, and she says, we just got our first flu patient in over a year. The hospital just got its first flu patient in over a year. And I said, how'd that happen? She says, we just started testing for it. They had not tested for the flu in over a year. Therefore, they had not had a flu patient. Isn't that amazing? Years ago, we used to test water fountains. In healthcare, we used to be required to test water fountains because water fountains are a great place for pathogens. If you knew how dirty water fountains are, you wouldn't drink out of water fountains. Housekeeping could clean a water fountain, you go back just a little while later, test it again, and boom, you grew out all kinds of pathogens. And I mean, we're required by the federal government to test it once a week. But guess what happened? All of a sudden, there was no dirty water fountains in the United States. None. There was none. Why? The feds told us to quit testing. Because it wasn't working. It wasn't doing anything, because just a few hours later, test again, and someone was drinking, you had growth again. So what's the use? It makes it look bad, just don't test the numbers. So the numbers can go both ways. The flu. During a typical year in the United States, 30 to 50,000 persons die from influenza viral infection. That's what our history has been over the last several years, is from the flu. 30 to 50,000 people die a year. But let's talk about the coronavirus. And what I'd like to look at tonight is what precautions worked and what treatments worked. What precautions worked and what treatments worked. And I know I heard today that y'all did treatments for folks with coronavirus. So I'd like to explore that. And let's look at this as a medical missionary standpoint of what we can do to, one, prevent such as coronavirus, and then what can we do to treat it? Unfortunately, my father, I could not help him. He was in a system that I could not even get on the parking lot. I couldn't even get on, they would not even allow me on the parking lot. So I couldn't help him. So there was nothing that I could do. But what can you do to prevent it? Let's talk prevention first. I believe the biggest thing is keeping the immune system high. Keeping the immune system high. And it's true that if you have other underlying problems, such as my father, who had significant cardiac issues, that's a challenge. Whether it's cardiac, whether it's diabetes, whether it's obesity, whatever those comorbidities are. And so the goal is to prevent that, is to try to reverse those problems proactively. But what is the best ways that we can build our immune system? Help me out here.
Rest.
Rest, yes. Yes, rest. Water. Sunshine. Exercise. Now let's go to sunshine. Why sunshine? Pardon? Vitamin D. Yes, I was listening to a physician and he said if he had a choice, the best vaccine for COVID is a vitamin D level of around 100. See, it's not how much vitamin D you take a day. I had a lady come in, and I may have shared this with y'all before. I had a lady come in, she was taking, I think I did share this last year. She came in, she was taking 5,000 IUs of vitamin D a day, and her vitamin D blood level was 12. Now, normal blood level, according to the lab, is 30 to 100. We used to think 32 was good. No, it's not. 30 is not good. I've got a friend of mine, we spoke recently together, and he's a neurologist, and if you're seeing him as a patient, he deals mostly with cognitive function. He does not want any of his patients below 60 for cognitive function. I have a buddy who he's a physician. For immune system, he doesn't want it at the lowest below 80, but he'd rather it between 90 and 100. And I have to agree with that. So this lady comes in, and her blood level is 12. She's taking 5,000 IUs a day. Now, there's two other important factors. One, she's Caucasian. Now, why does Caucasian make a difference? Pardon? You're from the Caribbean. Where? Pardon? East Africa. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. East Africa. Okay, where in East Africa? Kenya. Okay. So last year, I was in your neighbor country, Rwanda. And I took with me a black physician, Dr. Davis, because the medical school there in Kigali is wanting to implement in the education what we're teaching in lifestyle health. And so I can't teach there. I'm not a medical doctor. So I brought Dr. Davis, who started the medical school in Tallahassee, Florida. He's a black gentleman and a medical doctor. So I took Dr. Davis to Rwanda last year, and as we were talking to these Rwandan physicians, nutritionists, he said, we have sunglasses on our skin. He said it takes 6 times more sun exposure for us than it does Walt, because the pigmentation color, the darkness of the pigmentation. Well, this lady is Caucasian, so what does that mean? She would take the least amount. The second thing about this lady is she worked in landscaping year-round. Year-round. Her skin is a little bit tanned, but she has a lot of sunshine, and her blood level is only 12. So I said, let's go to twice a day, 5,000 twice a day. She went to 17. I said, okay, let's go 20,000 twice a day. That's what my buddy up in D.C. does, and Dr. Ted Watkins. So we go 20,000 twice a day. Now we're giving it 3 months in between lab tests, so that should be that should be long enough. So we do 20,000 twice a day for 3 months, and her level goes to 24. 20,000 twice a day for 3 months, and you're only at 24. What's wrong? And then I found that if you're low in magnesium, that can affect. So we added magnesium, and she went to 97. So it is not how much you take a day, because what may work for me may not work for you. You've got to test your blood and find out how much it takes to get you up to that 90 to 100 to be the best. So sunshine is a huge component to help with the immune system. I call the 3 S's. Sugar, stress, and lack of sleep, sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is the easiest way for me to get sick. Last night, I worked a rescue up in the mountains, had a young boy that got lost, and so I didn't get the sleep that I needed last night. So I hit it hard last night with oil of oregano and Alimed to keep from being sick coming here. Because that's what can take me down so fast, is sleep deprivation. So what are the 3 S's? And sugar, yes. So if you want to keep your immune system high, and the things that I'm about to share with you, I have people who did these and still got sick. And then when I started investigating, they were either not cutting out sugar, or they were still not getting their sleep, or they were having major stress. Unless you take care of those 3, doing these other items I'm about to share with you, they just don't work as well, or may not even work. So what did we do to help prevention for coronavirus? Number 1 was vitamin D. Vitamin D is huge, not only for the immune system. It increases the HDL, the good cholesterol. There's just so many benefits to vitamin D. It helps with brain function, significant. They have found it's a major cause of why boys are more prone to autism than girls, is a vitamin D deficiency. So you want to make sure that you've got that vitamin D level somewhere in that 90 to 100. The next item that we did was Alimed. Alimed was really huge in helping people. There's a study. I was talking this morning with England, and they've just finished a study with Alimed and coronavirus and the benefits and prevention and treatment, and it's phenomenal. And they're about to publish that study. Alimed is garlic. It takes 24 cloves of garlic to make 1 drop of Alimed. As prevention, folks were doing a teaspoon twice a day, as much as a teaspoon twice a day. Vitamin C, 2,000 milligrams, 3 to 4 times a day. Now, vitamin C, how long does vitamin C last after you've taken it? 30 minutes. So you don't want to take it just once a day. You want to take it multiple times a day. And that's why when we're addressing cancer, we're doing at least 6 to 8 times a day, if not, if they can do it, every hour to every hour, every 2 hours. So they're taking 2 grams, 2,000 milligrams, at least 3 times a day. But you want to look at bowel tolerance. Vitamin C, if you take too much, will give you green apple two-step. Y'all know what green apple two-step? The two-step, a loose stool. And so magnesium, if you take too much magnesium, it gives you a loose stool. And so you go to bowel tolerance. On magnesium, if you're hitting magnesium hard on something, or magnesium's not the issue here except for helping with vitamin D and with also helping with stress. So magnesium's not a problem using it here. But vitamin C, if you have a low bowel tolerance, you don't want to have a loose stool. That can cause you other issues also. So if you do have a low bowel tolerance to vitamin C, you can go to something called liposomal vitamin C. Yeah, who's heard of a liposomal? Liposomal you don't have the issue of bowel tolerance. Elderberry. And there was a lot of talk about elderberry at first. No, you can't use elderberry. It will excite the cytokine storm. And then, well, yes, if you do it, it's okay to do it up to day 3, maybe day 4, but then stop. We found that was not true. Scientists in Sydney, Australia found that the elderberry prevents the virus from sticking to the lungs, the walls of the lungs. So folks were doing a tablespoon twice a day. Treatment. A month ago, 5 weeks ago now, I got a call from an emergency room physician in Chattanooga. And he said, Walt, I have coronavirus. What do I need to do? So I shared with him what he needed to do. And he then called me the next week. And he was sounding bad. I mean, really bad. He was in the ER. He was in ICU, and it had gotten into his lungs, and he was having some significant challenges. And he says, "Okay, he says, now I need to hit this thing." So I don't know how much he really hit it. So I shared with him what to do, and I was getting ready to leave somewhere. I was telling him to do hot and cold fomentations. I said, "But you can't do it, and you're in the hospital." He says, "Sure I can. I'm the ER physician. I can do whatever I want to in my room here." He says, "Come down to Chattanooga and do hot and cold fomentations on me." I said, "I would, but I'm heading out to go speak somewhere else. I can't do it." And I said, "Get your wife to do it. She knows what she's doing." And I called him this week to see how he was doing. And he sounded great. He says, "I was getting ready to call you." He said, "I went to my pulmonologist yesterday, and he said, my lungs were totally clear." He said the pulmonologist had not seen anyone with the level of challenges that I had in my lungs. He said it was at least 3 months before they're seeing clearing in the lungs. And he said, mine's already clear. And he says, I contributed to the aggressiveness of what you shared. And that's what I'm going to share, the aggressiveness. I had a lady that she called me. And she said, I think I'm going to die. Our hospitals in the area, patients were having low O2 sats, and the ERs were still not accepting them, and said they had to be really bad to get in. And we're talking some low O2 sats. She says, I don't know if I'll live through the night. I can't breathe. I said, go to the hospital. She says, they won't take me. What can I do? And so I shared with her this. I called her the next morning and asked how she was doing. She sounded much better. And she said, the night before, I said, what is the level of severity? She said, I'm a 9 out of 10 and being able to breathe. And the next morning she said she was at a 3 out of 10. So she was breathing much, much better. I had a lady that she had quit drinking, quit eating. She could not tell, if they showed her the clock, she could not even tell what the clock was. She quit talking, and the ER still would not take her. And I forgot what her O2 sat was. It was really low. And so I shared with them what to do, and I told them to get a concentrator, and get an oxygen concentrator and start using that. And she lived. She did well. So what are the things that we shared with the folks? Number one, according to AliMed, the country in England, 1 tablespoon 3 times a day if a person is really, really sick with coronavirus. 1 tablespoon 3 times a day is their recommendation. Wes Youngberg, he was having people do 50,000 IUs of vitamin D 3 times a day for 4 to 5 days. 50,000 IU 3 times a day, so that's 150,000 a day, and doing that for 4 to 5 days, wait 4 to 5 days, and then cutting down after that. Vitamin C, we were having them do 2,000 milligrams every 2 hours, every waking 2 hours. Zinc, 50 milligrams a day. There's a physician, we saw people doing 100 milligrams. There's a physician office over in Sevierville near Gatlinburg that was having folks do over 200 milligrams a day. You want to be careful with that. Zinc lowers copper. If you have too much copper, the way you lower copper is give zinc. And so you can have a copper deficiency, and that's not good. And so if you do even at 50 milligrams, it's not uncommon to see the recommendation of 3 to 5 milligrams of copper, because you're going to lose copper. So 50 milligrams of copper a day. Some were doing 100, but you make sure you're doing the zinc along with it. Elderberry, the 2 tablespoons twice a day still. Oil of oregano. Who's used oil of oregano? That, y'all, is like a 40. I don't know what's a big handgun. 44. A big handgun. If I feel like I'm starting to catch something, even in my fire turnouts, I have a bottle of oil of oregano in my pocket, because if I'm out on a call all night, whether it's a wreck, a fire, whatever, I will start using that oil of oregano, because I know I'm so susceptible with sleep deprivation. And do you ever, when you start to get sick, you feel it here, you feel it up in here, and you feel like you're starting to catch something? If you know your body historically, you know when you got that, you got it. But if you'll use oil of oregano, and when you use oil of oregano, I say this in bold, I say it underlined, and I say it in red. Don't use 100% by itself the way I'm describing. Mix it. Mix it at least a 1 to 3. And that's what a lot of your mixtures are out there. 1 part oil of oregano, 100%. 3 parts olive oil. 3 parts olive oil. Even 1 drop of 100% pure can burn your mouth, can burn the esophagus. Even in water, oil and water don't mix too well. And so that strength can burn the esophagus, burn the mouth. So if you have 100% oil of oregano, mix it with olive oil, at least a 1 to 3 ratio. So what I'll do, now if you do this, you're going to say, Walt's trying to kill me, because it is kind of stout. But literally, I have oil oregano in my car, in my truck, at the office, beside my bedstand. Mary Lou's got it on her bedstand so we don't wake each other up. It works that effective. And also in my fire turnouts. If I feel like I'm starting to catch something, I'll take 10 drops under my tongue and swallow it. Hold it as long as I can, because even that starts to burn, and then I'll swallow it. And sometimes I might need to chase it with a little bit of water. But it's very, very effective in killing viruses. If you do, and so normally I'll take it if I feel like I'm catching something. If you catch it in the incipient stage. Firefighters here? No firefighters? Girls, y'all, I know we got EMT, but fire? No fire? Okay. Incipient stage. Pardon?
He's just not raising his hand.
Okay, firefighter. So incipient stage is the beginning stage of fire. We learned that in fire school. So if you can catch it in the incipient stage, where you're just starting to feel it, that's where it's effective. Y'all know who work in healthcare. Tamiflu. Don't do it after 48 hours. That ain't going to work. Your doc should tell you that. You got to catch that virus at the very beginning. Even in the natural side, you got to catch it in the beginning to be to be very effective. It's kind of like sin, Catch it at the beginning stages. So you take it, and if it's still there, 2 hours later, take it again. But normally that knocks it out. It's gone. If you need to then continue every 2 hours, but oil of oregano is very, very powerful. What if it's in the lungs? And that's the challenge with coronavirus, if it gets in the lungs. Number one is mullein. Now, does mullein grow up here? You got some?
Yeah.
That's the best medicine for the lungs. Who's ever cut mullein and used it? I mean, you can dry it like tobacco, and it works very, very well. You can make a tea out of it. You can make an extract out of it. Mullein is very, very effective. I like the extract for this situation, 2 mLs 3 times a day. 2 mLs 3 times a day. Mullein is a bronchial dilator. Who knows what albuterol is? It works like albuterol. It's a bronchial dilator. But also, it supports the lung function. It is the best herb for lung function. If there's any problem with the lung, mullein gives the phytochemicals that God gave us. How long has this earth been around? 6,000 years. How long have we had antibiotics through the pharmacy? Did God give folks stuff before? We think we're the smart people, Go to Africa. Go to Africa. I was in the national park. It's beautiful. I tell you what, to be able to go up and to be as far as from you to me from a giraffe. And that giraffe looking down at you. Now, they said don't go too close. They might get mad at you. And they can kick pretty good, they said. But I don't know. Do they kick? I don't know. They said don't get up to them. They might get mad. But to be that, and that looks down at you like a golden retriever just looking down at you. You just want to go up and hug it. I mean, it is so cool. And to drive through there and see the elephants and all the zebras and all the animals. But the ranger told me, he said, do not get out of the vehicle and walk in the grass. Why? The black mambas. He said, we're over 2 hours away from Kigali. And he said, you will not live. You will die. And so I asked the ranger, I said, dear old men, do they have an herb recipe that's an anti-venom for the black mamba? And he said, yes. I said, what do? He says, they just know certain herbs to go gather certain herbs, and he says you won't die. Isn't that cool? Go back to our heritage, y'all. Go back to just our grandparents, our great-grandparents. Go back to the Native Americans. Go back to, that God gave us medicine through the plants. It's tremendous. Mullein is very, very good. And I learned mullein from Dr. Agatha Thrash. Who remembers Dr. Thrash? I asked her, I said, Dr. Agatha, give me something that will work just like albuterol. And she said, Brother Walt, there's two things, mullein and one other one, and that'd be the next one I mentioned. I already knew that mullein was good for the lungs, but I did not know that it worked just as well or better than albuterol. The next one is the other one that she talked about, and that is eucalyptus. Now, who has ever used Vicks salve? The active ingredient? Eucalyptus. Now, growing up in the South, grandmas, that was just part of their purse. I mean, even in the summertime, it was in grandmother's purse. If you had an ailment, it was Vicks. If you had a sore throat, she'd say, open your mouth, boy. And she'd take a big old daub out of her finger and stick it down your throat and tell you to swallow it. No, petroleum jelly's not good, but it worked. It was phenomenal. The active ingredient in Vicks is eucalyptus. And Dr. Thrash said eucalyptus works better than albuterol. Dr. Joel Arcilla, he was a top surgeon in Philadelphia in his field. He was also a major trauma physician there in Philadelphia. And Arcilla, what he told me, he said, Walt, if you have a patient that needs albuterol, he says you take a nebulizer and you fill the bowl up to the line with distilled water. You put 2 to 10 drops based on the strength of the eucalyptus in there and have them nebulize it 2 to 3 times a day. He says it works better than albuterol. And we found that to be very true. And this doctor, the emergency room doctor down in Chattanooga, he felt the Alimed, the mullein, and the eucalyptus is what really, really made a big difference for him. When you have a person that is having problems breathing, they will tell you if they nebulize eucalyptus oil, they see significant improvement very fast. Hot and cold fomentations. And we talked about that last year. And where do we learn the effect of hot and cold fomentations as of the last 100 years? Kellogg used it. They used it, and the United States Army used it. It was the best. Remember I told you about the Army nurse who was in World War I back when I was in school. He said, he was in his 90s, and he said, Walt, he says, I need to share something with you. He said, someday you may need this knowledge. And he said, you probably will. He said, during World War II, he said the Spanish flu was killing a lot of our soldiers. And he said the most effective tool that we had in our hands was the hot and cold fomentations. I talked to someone that talked to a nurse that was at Battle Creek. And one night, military trucks rolled up to Battle Creek. And the Army took a bunch of the nurses off somewhere to treat the soldiers that had the Spanish flu. And the reason it was so secret is because you don't want your enemy to know that you're weak. Correct? The enemy thinks you're weak, they hit stronger. And so they did not want the enemy to know that our guys, as many that had it, had the Spanish flu. And they were treating quite a few of them here in the United States. And they took the nurses from Battle Creek to treat them. But hot and cold fomentations work extremely well. How many of y'all used hot and cold fomentations during the coronavirus? Did it work? Yeah, it worked. Worked very well. Another thing you can do is called proning. And proning is where you get down, and here's what they would do this in the ICUs. And they would have their patients in the COVID ICUs. They would take the patients, get them up, if they could, and they'd have them lean over like this, and they would cough as hard as they could. Now, what does that remind you of? Back blows. Remember back blows? Remember when you used to do back blows for choking? Well, they quit doing back blows. Can that little young'un come help me a minute? Come help me. I believe in back blows. I'm here today because of back blows. When I was 4 or 5, I swallowed a marble, a big marble, and I got choked. And I can remember it right now. And just 2 to 3 years before my brother died, drowning. And here I come to my father, not able to breathe, and he's scared to death. He just lost a child 2 to 3 years before. I don't remember, I was 4. I was 2 when my brother died. And so I was 4 or 5 when it happened, and my dad was just scared to death, jerks me up, puts me over his knee, and just starts beating on my back. And the marble came out. Well, back blows do work. Remember, for choking, we learned the Heimlich maneuver. Remember the Heimlich maneuver where you take, and I'm not going to do it, you're okay. And so you take your hand like this, you put it down here, take your 2 fingers, hold it down below this right here, the xiphoid process, and you pull up, okay? And then we learn to do back blows. But now they tell us we can't do back blows anymore. Well, because they don't do back blows correctly is the reason that we don't do back blows anymore, because they're extremely effective. So if you can turn sideways. So what people do is they'll do back blows like this. Well, all they're doing is banging it, and gravity's still making it go down. Back blows, keep going down, like this. And so then you have gravity assisting the foreign object to fall out. They're doing back blows like this, and they weren't working, so they told them to quit doing it. If one of my children or one of my grandchildren gets choked, I promise you I'm going to do back blows on that child if the Heimlich maneuver doesn't work, because I know it works. But you got to do it right. You got to lean them down, a little more, down, and you're hitting them here, and then you've got gravity allowing it to come out, versus here, it's just going to lodge even worse. Thank you, sir. Well, proning does that. So as the person's laying there, and they're down like this, and they're coughing as hard as they can, it's getting the fluid from the bottom of their lungs that it's high viscosity, and they're trying to get it and cough it out. And gravity is allowing that to happen. And so that's something that was used for treatment. Now, I've left one item out. It's the most important item. With this group, it's normal. But what is that most important item?
Prayer.
Yes, prayer. Because not one of those items heal. Not one of them. Only God does the healing. But just as we sit down and we eat, God blesses that apple. God blesses that watermelon like I had today to give me strength. Well, God blesses these also. Every time. Which one of y'all went to Wildwood? Did they teach you to pray before every treatment? Yeah. Yes? Yeah. Before every treatment, pray that God will bless that treatment. Bless that mullein. Bless that eucalyptus treatment. That it will be effective. Will we have another wave? We may. I don't know. Winter's going to be coming again. There's a good chance. As we look at the experience from the Spanish flu, it hit January of 18, and it went into December of, I think it was December of 19. But we could see more waves of it. But what's the most important thing? Don't get it. And the way you don't get it is keep yourself as healthy as possible. If you have problems, comorbidities, address them. If you have problems with sugar, get it under control. If you have problems with sleep deprivation, try to fix it. If you have problems with stress, now you can't plumb get rid of stress. Would you agree? You can't. You can't plumb get rid of stress, but you can manage it. And we talked about stress last year or year before last, how to address stress. The B complex, the lithium orotate, the magnesium, the exercise, the water, the sleep, all those things you need. But don't forget that one item that we talked about, and that is where you take a piece of paper. It's so simple, but it works. You take a piece of paper and you write down every stressor that you have, things that stress you. And then you take a piece of paper and you draw a T. And on this part of the paper you write controlled, controllable. And on this one, non-controllable. And you write each of those stressors that you can control here. And those that you can't do a lick about right here. Fretting and crying and worrying won't fix it. It's there. There's nothing you can do. The example I used last year is the lady who comes to me and her son, whatever happened, I don't know, but he ended up shooting a state trooper. And he's in prison the rest of his life. No chance of getting out. She'll never see him again. She'll never hug him again. She can write him letters. But that's what's going on. At least on this earth, she won't see him again. In person. And so it was really, really bothering her. I can't imagine it, can you? Can you imagine never seeing him again? Never able to hug him again? I mean, that's just, I can't grasp it. So I told her, I said, take that issue and write it right here, non-controllable. There's not a thing she can do about it. There's other things she can, over here, controllable. I said, then take that piece of paper and tear it plumb in half. And the non-controllables that you can't do anything about, sit down and talk to God. And give it to Him. And then leave it with Him. Yes, she still needs to write her son. Yes, she needs to pray daily for her son. But fretting isn't going to fix it. She needs to trust in God and give it to Him. There's things that we fret over that we can't do a lick about. And God wants to be there. If He comes to you and says, you're His Father, and He says, Dad, I need help with this. Are you glad to help Him? Do you want to help Him? God wants to help you even more. That's just how it is. There's things that He can worry about. Let's say there's a neighbor boy who's bullying him. Not a problem for you. You got it fixed. You're going to take care of that. You're going to talk to that parent and say, have your boy leave my boy alone. And you're going to protect your son. God's going to do the same thing for us. He's going to take care of us. And the things that are on the other side, the controllable ones, ask God to take your hand and help you with those. And work with Him through those. That's the important thing. As we look at coronavirus or anything else might be putting in our way that you read about, a time as never before. Remember the dream? Do you remember the dream of folks getting their wagons and their horses and they're heading up the mountain? And they got their stuff in the wagons and they had to dump the stuff out of the wagons. And then it got too narrow and they had to even quit using the wagons. And they had to walk. And then after a while they're hanging on the sides. And after a while they actually had to hang on to a rope. And then there's a time they had to swing across an area with that rope. What's the rope? What's the rope? Faith? Faith in Christ. That's our only hope of what you read about. But we don't get to... Y'all, I'm scared to death of heights. I am scared. I'll work a ladder truck all night long fighting the fire. But come daylight, I'm coming down. Someone else better get up there because I won't come down after that sunlight comes up because I'm scared of heights. But that trust in God, that relationship with Christ is what's going to give us that willingness to swing across. Who's been to the Grand Canyon? Scared me to death looking over the side. I'm scared of heights. I mean, it's like a magnet pulling me that way. I had to stand back. The only way we get to what she read about is trials. And yes, this has been a trial. For some more and some less. But it's trials that are building us to that time as never before. The last I want to do before we quit is to share with us some things that y'all have done in addressing coronavirus. Who's got the microphone? Who'd like to share? I know y'all been doing stuff. Share with us. Anybody helped anybody with coronavirus? Or had coronavirus and did natural things? We're looking for natural things. I know there's more stuff than I talked about. Here we have a hand over here, the lady.
I slept in the sun.
Slept in the sun?
Yeah, like I just had to take a lot of sunshine
Okay.
and a lot of sleeping, resting.
Yes, a lot of rest is important. Oh, another thing I failed to mention was one of the problems with coronavirus is that you're prone to strokes. Well, coronavirus, also people don't drink much. Well, what happens when you're dehydrated? The blood is thicker and stickier. Plus you're prone to strokes, and then they don't want to eat much. And so I encouraged them, if they did eat, to drink juices, vegetable juices. So it got them some hydration. It got it in, and the thing is, when you drink juice, it's in the blood within 15 to 20 minutes. And I might share tomorrow about some challenges that Mary Lou's had. And but down at UAB, anybody been down Alabama? Okay, down at UAB, which is a very good, it's one of our best cardiac hospitals in the southeast, and their advanced cardiac team, if they have a patient that's, really bad, got a tremendously low EF, ejection fraction, they'll put them on juice. That's it, vegetable juice, for 70 days. 70 days. See, when you're over, the second major thing, the second major energy expenditure of the heart is digestion. In a person with cardiac problems, significant cardiac problems, they tell them to eat small meals because it's taking so much energy from their heart to digest that food. So what they learned at UAB is by juicing. See, what happens is nutritionists tell us that when you digest a meal, it takes as much vital force to digest that meal as it does to go to the gym and work out. So these cardiologists it's called the advanced cardiac team there. They want to reduce the load on that heart. And so they will juice the patient who has a significantly low EF. And therefore it doesn't take as much energy, because you net more energy by juicing because it's in the blood within 15-20 minutes. It's not taking on average 3 to 4 hours to digest. And so that's pretty cool, is to juice to help them. Okay, so sunshine, you laid out in the sun. What else?
Yeah, she just reminded me, actually, when you have COVID, don't sleep too much. The more active you are, the better, so that I guess it doesn't sit
for
in
the
the
breathing
lungs too much, and just being active helps.
Okay.
We found that a lot of people in my community, people that I knew who were males and had it and slept more, took longer to heal than the males who just assumed it's a regular flu and I'm going to be busy and do my everyday even if I'm not well.
That's interesting. It makes sense. Though we don't want that person overworking, we want that vital force to not be too exerted, but yet the activity kept the circulation going, kept the oxygenation going. Makes sense. Good, thank you. That makes sense. Yes. Back on the back row.
So, prevention is huge. And we, as a family, we did all the things you had talked about. January came, and we sent Gracie out to California to visit my mother and to go to the EQ Summit at Weimar. And she just ran the entire time. They were busy. They did projects with Grandma. It was a buzz. It was a good buzz. But she came home tired. And we loaded her up, and we had planned to go down to Florida as soon as she got home. So she had one day at home, and then we went down for 2 weeks, and we were on a trip. We had a great time. It was some more buzz for her. When we got home, and about 3 or 4 days later, she got sick. And, at first you think, is it COVID or not? Well, it definitely was. We never got her tested, but she had all the signs. So I was aggressive. I thought I was aggressive with it. And as mothers do, I lay awake at night sometimes and I pray. And God told me one night, he said, you have to be way more aggressive than you're being. Her lungs were starting to hurt. And she had gone to bed telling me, Mom, I feel like somebody is stomping on my chest. There was no cough. There was no phlegm. But the heaviness was there. And so we started fomentations the next day. Well, I think it was that night. Yeah, that night. I got up. We started fomentations 4 times a day. And we did that straight for a week. But I tell you what, it kept coming back. Because just as soon as she'd start feeling better, and she'd get up and she'd be active like she does, and she'd, bounce around, nope, right back where we were again. What, 3 weeks? 4 weeks? A month. It was a month we struggled with it. And even after that, it took her a while to get back. So, prevention. For her, in her case, it was just getting run down. Being too tired. Doing too much. Even good things. Even fun stress, But now I have a question for you. They have an opportunity to go to Iceland. It's either the vaccine or a positive antibody test. We can't get a positive antibody test on Gracie. But we got one on Brittany. So is that possible that she's still fighting it and her body hasn't built up the antibodies, or what?
The first thing is whether or not you choose the vaccine or not.
No. That's why we're shooting for the positive antibody test.
Yes. There's things that we want to do sometimes, and we have to look at the risk ratio. And, exposing her to COVID, she'd get COVID for sure and get the antibodies. Whether she had it, you think she had it before, and there's a good chance she did, but definitely if you exposed her to one, she would then get it. Do you want to expose her to it as what you dealt with before? Probably not. And so is that worth the risk, the vaccine or her getting sick again, to her going? I've got a buddy of mine, he's internal medicine over in North Carolina, and he called me last month and he said, Walt, I may need a job. He's internal medicine. What do you mean? He said, it looks like they're going to want to make us take the vaccine, and I'm not, and I won't have a job anymore as a medical doctor. We were in New York in 2008, and Dr. Agatha was there, and we were talking to the medical community in New York City, and they were requiring vaccines for the staff, and we weren't even talking the coronavirus vaccine. Those vaccines are nothing compared to what this thing will do. And she told them, you have 3 choices. She said it's real simple, because they said, well, can I take some activated charcoal or put a poultice on it or this or that? And she said, once you take that vaccine, it's in you. And she says, you have 3 choices. You have a choice of getting the vaccine. You have a choice of moving to another state where they don't require the vaccine, or just leave the medical field. And that's what my buddy is looking at doing, is if they do end up in North Carolina requiring that, he said he will quit practicing medicine. That's one of them questions you go to God and you ask God about. But the aspect of, there's things that we want to do in life, And we have to make that decision, do we jeopardize our health? Like, I'm not traveling right now abroad because that challenge, and I'm not going to get the vaccine. And so I may not be going back to Africa. I'm not able to go to, usually I go up to Amazing Discoveries. I can't go to Amazing Discoveries now because of the challenge there. And if they ever require it in Canada, I won't be going back to, so I don't know if that answers your question. How can you know, if she did get it, I would.
Why isn't she showing a positive?
I can't answer that one. I would think she would. I would think she would. Yes, sir.
We had the second test today, so make it a matter of prayer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't know the accuracy of that test, but I know the accuracy of the other tests, the positive or not positive. I wouldn't go to the bank on that one. Anyone else? I wish I could answer that better, but I don't know why it's not high. I don't know. Up here.
All right. During this whole COVID thing, I was a cashier at Doug's, and I never got COVID. And when they required me to wear my mask, I did, because they required it. I didn't like it, but we did for quite a while, and now I don't have to anymore. And I'm wondering why I didn't get it. But then I also, when I think about it, I think God just protected me to do my work.
Sure.
I did start taking zinc and NAC, is that?
NAC.
Yeah, I did that for a while for my chiropractor. So I mean, I might have boosted my immune system, but I live in a place now where we can't. I mean, there's pressure now to get the vaccine. And just today I'm on medical assistance, and just today I got from Blue Cross and Blue Shield a thing that says something about another thing to get the vaccine, and I'm against it. I just don't want to get it, and I don't want a vaccine. I'm not afraid of I haven't had the symptoms yet, so why put the vaccine in me, you know? But I'm thinking it's going to get harder to, you know, the media says, you know, they're going to target everybody who's not going to get it, you know, to get it. And so, I don't know, it kind of feels like a conspiracy, and the more they push it, the more I don't want to.
Yeah, and let me answer that question. I was interviewed by the New York Times, and then I was interviewed by the major television station in Germany. And they both asked the same question. The German television station did show my response. New York Times did not. They cut my response. We spent 3 hours talking, and they probably quoted me in maybe 6 paragraphs. But what I told them on that question is that do your due diligence. On that question you have, what do? Do the due diligence. And then you ask God, God, what do I need to do? Does he say take the vaccine? And if you're a praying person, you know God's voice. If God told you to take the vaccine, then take the vaccine. I don't know if he told anybody to do that or not, but if he did, then you obey him. If he says don't do it, don't do it. And I say that at first. But I believe there's a bunch of sheep out there. And if we can't stand up to this, how do we stand up to what she was talking about in Daniel 12:1? And so how do you get better and better at whether it's working out or whatever? I mean,
The more you resist it, the more you get stronger to resist it.
yes, I call it the no muscle.
The no muscle.
Yeah, we all got a no muscle. And, you know, we talked about last time that Satan's ultimate temptation is what? Appetite. And so if you can say no to appetite, you can say no to most any other temptation. And the more we're able to say no to those things that we want to do or people are trying to impress us to do, the stronger that no muscle is. And to get to where she talked about, you better have a real strong no muscle. And I believe God's putting this stuff before us to strengthen us. And again, whatever choice you do, it's what God tells you to do.
Well, I'm going to do a lot more praying then.
Yes. And I did say one more thing. And after I said it, the German guy, they had 6 people with the German TV station there, and the producer, after I said it, he said, that's a wrap, we got enough. I said, y'all, we live in America, and America is a free country still. And I said, if folks are wanting to change us to go communistic or to go socialistic, they can just go on down to Venezuela as far as I'm concerned, but leave us free. We're still free and we can still make choices. And we need to still make choices. Look at what our forefathers did. Just look at our own kinfolk that were in Vietnam, we're in Korea, we're in World War II, we're in World War I. They died for us to be free. We can at least say no and stand up.
I just want to share, I've used the liposomal vitamin C. We make our own, and last April, my family all came. I have 6 brothers and sisters. There's 6 of us all together, and my youngest brother that came from Denver, he was the one that was so worried about giving something to my mom because she's 80 years old, 81. And once, we all get together and we're all meeting the first night, we all get together and he starts feeling fatigued and stuff and achy, and he thought it was because of his long drive. And he woke up the next morning with a fever and he was staying with my mom. And so he went right to the hospital and got tested. Of course, he tested positive. And so I just started him on, I made a double batch of vitamin C and said, take this, take a shot like every 2 hours or every hour, just keep doing that throughout the day. And he was just chugging that stuff down. And then I started him on zinc and stuff too. And he was over it within 4 days. He was feeling much better, and he was able to drive home and stuff. And then throughout the whole year, I have a friend that every time she knew somebody that would have it test positive, she'd call me up and say, "Can you make a jug of liposomal vitamin C?" And so I'd make it, and they'd stop by and pick it up, and so that's been a go-to for us.
It's really good, and I think another key is to be able to stay out of the hospital. Once my dad was in the system, I had no access to him. And to be proactive, as they're saying back there, that's the key. Or try to be as aggressive as you can before they're really bad off. Or you can't touch them anymore. They're out of your hands. Is there anyone? Yes, back in the back.
I probably can't talk. When I had COVID, it was probably the worst experience I ever went through. It's still there, it's something you don't forget. Mm-hmm. And what pulled me through was the prayers that everybody uplifted me with. It was just unbelievable. Everybody that was behind me on it. I did end up in that first week I had it. I just went downhill more and more and more and more. And I did get dehydrated bad, and I ended up in the ER. And I couldn't even sit up in the wheelchair when he wheeled me in. I just slumped over like a rag doll, And then when I got through that, then that second week, then I started getting the fomentation shunt again. And Brittany started off with the fomentations for me. But it already set in that first week pretty bad. And it did get in my lungs, that pneumonia there, that really, I couldn't even breathe. Anytime I would shift in bed, you would have these coughing spells that you would go on for 5-10 minutes, until you could stop and relax a little bit, and then you didn't want to move because you knew if you moved, you'd start hacking away again. But it was just an experience I don't ever want to go through again, and you just feel closer to death than you've ever felt. And you talk about the drinking and getting all this down. That's the last thing on your mind that you can do, even a sip.
That's what I've heard.
And the chills, the cold, just so cold, just shivering. I mean, there was every symptom, and that was there. It was just absolutely horrible. So anybody that does go through it, my heart just goes out to them, because it'll be something I'll never forget. But I know the Lord pulled me through it. Mm-hmm. So now I suffer now with hair loss, and I asked my doctor about it. I says, "What's going on with this? Is this part of COVID?" And she said, "It's not." I looked it up too, and she said, "It's not hair loss, it's shedding." And I thought, shedding or loss, it's the same thing to me. It's coming out, It's so this is one time I'm thankful that I had thick hair, because it's getting thinner. Yes. And she said it could last up to 4 to 6 months. And I thought, well, I better start looking at wigs, because it's not gonna hold out no matter how thick your hair was. So I don't know if there's anything you can do or take to strengthen those hair follicles in there or what. But I mean, every time I shower, I got a big old clump of hair.
I would try. The brand name is Provana. The item is called Hair, Skin, and Nails. And see if that helps. Provana. Okay. Is the brand, and the product is called Hair, Skin, and Nails. Let's go back to what y'all mentioned back there. Aggressive. Were you aggressive enough at the beginning? Well, let's talk firefighting. When I started firefighting, we were aggressive. I had an excellent chief. I started in 1980. We were aggressive. And then over the years, this philosophy of everyone go home came in. And I support that 1,000%. I want to go home. My 2 boys are firefighters. I want them to go home. I want everybody to go home. But we're firefighters. We go in a burning building. Some people say that just ain't right. But if you're going to be a firefighter, you got to go in. And if you're going to go in, be aggressive. And what happened is we would see guys get off the trucks and just kind of wander around, pull the hose off, get out, start spraying the water, and they were not aggressive. And we see loss of house more. And so about 4 years ago, folks finally started waking up again. And I remember I went to a conference in Knoxville. TEMA pulled us together and said, "Listen, chiefs, you got to start getting aggressive again." And I remember sitting there with the chief with Knoxville Fire Department and others, and we were going, "Thank you." Because what happened was the legal aspect was throttling us back on how aggressive we could fight a house fire. If we were too aggressive and something happened, we would be that would be negligence. And so us old guys, we were glad to take that muzzle off of us. Let's get aggressive and put this house fire out, or whatever the situation is. And so now we're seeing training for fire departments to have aggressive instant command, aggressive fire suppression. Yes, still safety is number one. In the coronavirus, people were scared. Well, I don't know. I might get coronavirus. I don't know if I'll go help them or not. We need to be aggressive, attacking it aggressive. Once a person has coronavirus, you need to hit it hard and not just play with it. And then if you see, it's so easy for folks to, they're tired, they don't want to do stuff. They're tired of the fomentations, they're tired of taking stuff. You got to still do it. If you see it's not resolving, you got to still hit it hard as you can. Fight it. And that's and I believe your family saw that. And that's what you got to do. You got to hit it hard. Anyone else? Yeah, up here.
Well, I have several members of my family that got COVID. And the worst one was my brother-in-law in England, because I have my sister that married him. He was so bad that he was neurological. I mean, my sister would send videos of, and he would fall asleep and he would act like a baby. I mean, just neurological. And so his family wanted to put him in the hospital. My sister says, don't do it. My dad raised us natural, and he wasn't. But she told him, you know, what happened, like with your dad, what will happen with him if he goes in there? He's not going to come back. Mm-hmm. And so she stayed home, and we used the same principles for several family members, but liposomal vitamin C, sunshine, hydrotherapy, ozone. That wasn't mentioned. He used ozone.
It would. That makes
ozone
sense.
sauna as well as breathing. And he totally has made a complete recovery. He's fine. But we noticed something that was interesting, and maybe it's just a thought, but when we had a couple of members of our family, I and my son, got it early on, it kind of seemed like a cold, but it was a very strange thing because it was lungs. We had all the lung problems. But we did, you know, all those same things, mainly hydrotherapy, and it went away and we were fine. But then, and I noticed this in multiple occasions, when everybody started getting vaccinated, then my mom and dad were exposed to many people that were vaccinated because there was many in their church. And then they got it, and we happened to be visiting when they were coming down with it. So then we got it from them. But it was much worse after that. And so it makes me wonder if they weren't shedding something stronger. Because then later my kid's piano teacher said that, you know, during the whole entire year, you know, random people got COVID in their church. This is an Adventist church, but it's a huge church or a big church in South Dakota, where we're from. And, you know, people would get it, but then after about 50%, she said, of the people got vaccinated, then the whole church wiped out with COVID. Everybody had to stay home. And it was much worse for those that were come in contact with all of this. So whether or not that is something that you've seen, that seems to be something it's much worse when you've been exposed to someone who's been vaccinated. They're shedding the virus. I know it happens with other vaccines.
Have you heard of Dr. Sherry Tenpenny?
Uh-huh. Yep.
She's talking about it.
Yep. I've known about her since before we had our oldest son. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's an interesting lady. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Very nice lady.
I don't know, but that seems to be our case. But our biggest thing, I mean, we did the same thing. We laid out in the sunshine, and our UPS man came and saw us laying in the sunshine. So I told Shane, I was like, I think he thinks we're weird.
Anyone else before we close? Got another one back here.
Thanks. I just had a question, you know, about prevention, and I was wondering what you thought of NAC.
That's a good question. NAC is, according to my suppliers, NAC is the supplement suppliers. NAC is getting ready to be pulled possibly away from them.
Really?
Yes. They're already telling me they're getting letters from the FDA that they have to have, it has to be, they have to get special permission in classifying it as a drug. I know that a bottle of NAC that's $35, across the street at CVS, it's $300 and some for the same bottle. And I have two suppliers that already told me that one has already stopped selling it because they said they got the letter and they're not going to request for that permission. And then another supplier, both of them are international suppliers, and another one told me that they got the same letter and they expect to not be able to have it available. Okay. So we're going to see NAC possibly leaving our hands without a prescription.
But is that, yeah, it's not because it's not effective.
Oh, though. It's because it is effective.
Okay. I was going to say, because we've been taking.
Yeah, the pharmaceutical industry wants it because it is effective.
As soon as COVID came on, we started taking NAC along with other vitamins and things like that.
Yes.
We've been healthier than we've ever been the whole time.
Yeah, Nedley talks very strong about it. and his experience with it, but it could be taken out of our hands without a prescription.
That would be a shame.
Yeah, there's Try Now, NOW. Now still has it. I can still get it from Now, but we're starting to see it falling away out of our hands. Anybody else before we close? Let me share one more story, and we'll close. Is there another thing? No? Yes, go ahead.
I also just wanted to share. Yes. I thank God that I didn't get it, but I was many times where I was exposed to folks, my family that had it. But then my family back home in Kenya got it. And the one thing I know that really helped was, of course, the concoctions that they make with essential oils, which they could drink, but also steaming. Steaming was really helpful, where it opens up the lungs. I mean, like, really to try and avoid it going down into the lungs, because my mom had it, my sister, all their family, they had lost a family member, and pretty much everybody that attended that funeral left, although we lost an uncle out of that, because when he started having the symptoms, he just stayed in bed the whole 3 days. It's this new Delta variants, because it's pretty recent, last month. But at least the ones that were aggressively taking those concoctions, going out for a walk, being out in the sun, and rehydrating, they actually beat it. So I think the sooner you respond and start steaming and just drinking what you need, the NAC, of course, zinc. And the one thing, of course, they do also, because, it's also just being able to monitor your oxygen level. So they had to get the oximeters to make sure they're monitoring the oxygen.
Yes.
Yeah, and really avoid the hospital.
She has a question. I have a question. So all these remedies that you've told us, are there those that you take all the time, and there are some that you just take when it's full-blown COVID?
Yes. I see a lot of folks that are sick, not as much now as I did. So when things were at a higher level, I was taking the Alimed for sure every day. I was taking the elderberry every day. I was taking the vitamin C every day. The vitamin D every day. Now I do intermittent with the Alimed, because there's just not hardly anybody in our neck of the woods getting COVID right now, and so I'm not using it every day. Anytime I feel like something's coming on, I'll take the Alimed and I'll take the oil oregano. What I am still doing every day is I am doing the vitamin D heavy every day. Still do the zinc and vitamin C, but I have stopped the elderberry, and I'm not doing the Alimed every day.
Where can we get Alimed?
You gonna be here Sunday? I'll share with you Sunday. There's several places you can get it, but I'll tell you where you can get it at a whole lot better price if you'll be here Sunday.
It's really hard to give up the elderberry because it tastes so good.
Oh yeah, doesn't it? I mean, you can still take the elderberry. Will elderberry grow here?
Yes.
Yeah, put you some bushes out. Miss White put bushes out.
In our orchard.
Good.
We planted 7 this year.
Yeah, get your elderberry plants, and the old mountain women where I live, they'll get it and they'll phrase it and put it in baggies and phrase it, and then they'll pull the baggies out and they'll make teas of it. But what we're seeing a lot of now is a lot of the mamas, and I'm so excited. I got young mamas in their 20s that are now making extracts for their families, and so make your own extract. It's easy to make, and if there's a question on how to make extracts, we talked about it a couple years ago. But ask Sunday, and I can tell y'all how to make extracts, and you can just make your own extracts.
I've heard that the flowers are even stronger than the berries.
Yeah, it's just easier to get the berries. Yeah. Well, one last story. This was probably almost 20 years ago. I was in Virginia speaking on natural remedies, And back where that fella in the back row in the blue shirt is sitting, there was a little old lady sitting there. And it was a room big like this. And I was talking about, and I've shared this with y'all before, but there's some new folks here. And I was talking about using pine sap. And she raised her hand. And she says, "Can I tell you something about pine sap?" Well, we're not very bright if we don't listen to folks, especially folks that are older than us. They got a lot of wisdom to share with us. And she says, "Back when I was a little girl in 1918, so you know that's been a while ago." She says, "When I was a little girl in 1918, my daddy was a nurse, and my brother and I would go over with him as he would go house to house treating patients with the Spanish flu." She says he was doing hot and cold fomentations. She said, and they were living in Southern California. She said, when we get home at night, Daddy'd take a pine knot and he'd put it over a fire, and he'd put it over a fire, and pine sap would drip out, and into a cup of water, and we'd all drank it. And we never got the Spanish flu. Well, my question was, how many drops? How much water? How much did y'all drink? She says, "I don't know, I was just a little girl." She says, "But it worked." Well, when I came back to East Tennessee, I was working in Virginia at the time. I came back to East Tennessee, and I was teaching again on natural remedies. Now, this has been 16 and 17 years ago, and a lot of these folks have passed away. But these were older ladies, and they would come to see me, and I would tell people about pine sap, and they'd say, "Let us tell you how to use pine sap." And they were from different mountain communities. It wasn't the Flatland women. It was a lady from Cosby, Grassy, Dario, Centerview, up in the mountains. And they'd take it and they'd put pine sap and rub it on their gums and say, "Do that once a day and you won't get sick." Or they'd say when they were little girls, and men didn't tell me this. This is the women that would tell me this. They'd say when they were little girls, either their mama or their grandmother. Now, in the mountain communities, a lot of folks live right next to each other, to the grandparents, and the grandmothers still had. My grandmother did a lot of raising of me while my mama was working, and so they would use the same. These women didn't know each other, but they would use the same measuring amount, and the measurement was a match head. You know, remember the old matches you strike, self-striking? And it was from a half a match head to a match head. And the grandmothers would give them, or the mothers would give them a piece of that to chew on the way to school. They didn't have school buses back then. And they would chew as they would walk the mountain roads to the schools. And they'd chew on it every morning. And they didn't get sick. And so pine sap has something to do with building the immune system. So what do we get out of tonight? I think number one is trust God. Trust God. Listen to God. Ask God what you need to do. It's very important. I was sharing this on the way here up today, that there's something I've been wanting to buy for a long, long time. And I had an opportunity last week to buy one. And it was reasonable. It was affordable. I prayed about it. It was week before last. I prayed all last weekend and I kept getting the same answer. No. I just kept praying. Come on, God, you know, I'd really like to use this. I could use it for my family. There's a lot of cool stuff I could do with this. No. I didn't buy it. I emailed the man first of the week and I said, "Sir, I told you I was going to pray about it and God told me no, so I'm not going to get it." Listen to God. And there's times that you want to do something, but you got to say, if God says no, say no. If He says yes, do it. Listen to God. It's very important. And learn the natural remedies that God has given us. Don't use the excuse, "Well, I didn't know." You got folks here that know it. Learn it from them. And I think God holds us responsibility responsible. He gave us a brain. Use it, you know. And so we need to learn these natural remedies that He's given us to take care of, number one, ourselves. A firefighter. Who's the first person you take care of? Why? You can't take care of anybody else if you don't take care of yourself. Number one person. If he goes into a house fire and you're in there and he's got his mask on, he is not going to give you his mask. He won't. Because you'll take it away from him, and now he doesn't have the oxygen to get you out, or the air to get you out. He's got to take care of himself to take care of you. You got to take care of yourself. And then you take care of your family and those around you and everyone else. And so, one, listen to God. Trust in God. Learn His natural remedies. And if someone's sick, pray, God, do I need to go take care of that person? If He says yes, go take care of them. We got to be medical missionaries. And what better way when a person is in the kind of shape that you felt in, to go to that person and pray with them, take care of them, touch them. I mean, coronavirus was like AIDS. It was like leprosy. Nobody wanted to be around them. Scared to death. We're not as scared now as we were a year ago. I can remember when we first got AIDS patients. EMS would go in full Tyvek, head to toe, scared to death. And so ask God, do I need to take care of this person? If God says yes, go in and take care of them. It's a time to witness that person and show them, and don't you take that credit, because you didn't do a thing but obey. God's the one that did the healing. Let's pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we know a time is soon to come, a time as never before. And though things are a little challenging right now, and yes, economics are starting to get a little tough right now, we still aren't in bad shape.